why you need to check him out. When I saw that, I was like, always, because things will go down badly and then people get out of it and then slowly. Can you imagine when we're starting with police state department from scratch?
All right. I'd like to call the May 17th, 2018 council meeting to order. We will have an opening given to us by Michelle Barber.
Oh, alrighty. Our Father in heaven, we are thankful to be gathered as residents and leaders in this city. We're thankful for the opportunity that we have to improve the lives of those around us and to be stewards of so many things. We pray for a blessing of guidance and appreciation on us this night and always, and we especially pray for the residents in our city, those that may be undergoing difficult times and in need of thy service and love. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so the first thing that we have is a proclamation. I was hoping that Josh might be here, but I forgot to ask him if he was going to come. It is Public Works Week next week, so I'd just like to read this proclamation. Whereas Kaysville City's over 30,000 residents are served each day by a network of infrastructure from streets to culinary water to stormwater to sewer and sanitation, and whereas these are essential to our most basic needs and functions and are vital to maintaining this as a sustainable and vibrant community, and whereas the service and function of said infrastructure could not exist without the dedicated efforts of the staff in both Public Works and Community Development Departments, and whereas the American Public Works Association, APWA, has celebrated Public Works Week since 1960, whereas this year's theme, The Power of Public Works, is a tribute to all the staff and elected officials who strengthen the foundation of a stronger, more livable community, and whereas this week serves as an opportunity to both celebrate the efforts of our staff and to better reach out to and to interact with our community. Therefore, be it now resolved that I, Katie Witt, Mayor of Kaysville, do hereby designate May 20th through the 26th, 2018 as Public Works Week, and encourage all residents and community members to join with APWA and the Public Works Director in paying tribute and expressing gratitude for the contributions to the following: Cody Thompson, Ryan Roberts, Chris Williams, Jerry Hill, Jared Tubbs, Jeff Brown, R.J. Hooper, Gary Garner, Tyson Shaw, Logan Barker, Nick Moss, Gustavo Cisneros, Amanda Cross, Stacy Harward, Andy Thompson, Mike Blackham, Dan Jessup, Becky Argyle, Leanne McKinnon, Anne-Marie Plazer, Marcia Cook, Lyle Gibson, and countless other supporting staff, elected officials, and volunteers. So we should all celebrate next week. And it's going to be, actually, just so you know, there's a contest going on amongst the elementary school kids. They are having a contest to name the vac truck. Mm-hmm. If it was me, would have named it Snuffleupagus. But I think they're going to announce that next week, so we'll put that on our social media when we find out what the name of the vac truck is. All right. And our next thing, I want to turn over to Michelle Barber.
Thank you. We are going to recognize our Youth City Council, and we actually have our Youth City Council that is graduating this year. Some of them are over at the police station still interviewing for their replacements, and some of them are at choir concerts. So I will name them off who have been serving on our city council and that will be moving on. Our Youth City Council is a fantastic organization that trains the younger generation on all things local government and leadership. So we have Anna Thompson, Emma Francis, Aiden Robney, Calvin Stranger, Rebecca Istrel, Sam Layton, and Abby Hassler. And they have all served for different amounts of time. Anna Thompson has actually been on since 2013 serving, so that's quite a contribution. And we have some beautiful plaques that we will be presenting to them, but we wanted to tell them thank you and a plug for our next upcoming group.
Thank you.
So,
and
thank you.
I know Councilmember Garn also
Yes.
served with them. Do you have any words?
Well, no, I just wish I don't know where I would be today if I had been that actively engaged in the community back when I was that age, but that's a pretty fine list of names. They're wonderful young people. I was just in a dance studio getting some dance shoes for my daughter the other day, and somebody had seen on the website, because we have a tech guru here in Councilmember Barber, that it's out there for new applicants, and the young lady who was there asked me, can I do that? Should I do that? I said, yeah, absolutely you should. So it's a wonderful thing, and it's an exclusive group. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you.
We actually just had our advisor walk in, Linda Francis, who's been over interviewing. So
Yes.
we were just saying thank you for all of your work and all of our seniors that we are going to miss. They are going to be long gone before our next council meeting.
And
So
they know that they'd love to come, but they're all, of course, busy, and they're all at concerts and this, that, and the other. So.
All right.
But they have loved it, and it was exciting to see some of the new kids be excited, so I think we'll make it here next year.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we should probably take a picture.
yes, I think it's a good idea.
I think we should.
Yes, come on.
Representing them all. Yes.
Should maybe hold like one of them.
Everybody?
Awesome. Great. Yeah, they look beautiful. And thank you so much. Yeah. They're going to have a celebratory event next Thursday. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing that for them. They love that. Yeah. It's not crazy. I know. Oh, so awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. And Maria.
I hope it's in the budget for a new chair sometime. Okay. Declaration of any conflicts of interest. Anybody? None? Okay. All right. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Anybody want to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay. I will entertain a motion at this time to pass the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Page. Councilmember Hansen.
Yay. Aye. Sorry. I was just looking at yays. Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That passes 4-0. Right? Yes, 4. Okay, let's go on to action items. Preliminary plat approval for the Matteson Meadows subdivision lot 3 amended. And is that going to be Andy? Thank you.
Item subdivision proposed is located down off of Blooming Grove 200 West, near the elementary school down there Shepherd Lane. Property is about 2 acres in size. It currently has one existing home on it, as you can see. The request is to subdivide the property into 2 lots, leaving the existing lot to the east with the existing home on it and creating a second lot just to the west of that. In order to do that, that requires it to go from a single flag lot to a double flag lot. They have adequate space in the flag stem to meet the city's requirement. The lots are in R120 zone. They're both over an acre, so they will comply with the zoning and with requirements for flag lot subdivision. So the Planning Commission has reviewed this and recommended preliminary plat approval for the Matteson Meadows Lot 3 amended subdivision.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we do not have anybody signed up to speak to this item from the public, so we'll go to council questions. Any questions on this from council? No? Okay. I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plot approval for Matteson Meadows subdivision.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber, seconded by Councilmember Hanson. Councilmember Page.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 4-0. Okay, now we're moving on to our work items. Shane?
Mayor and Council, the first item there is a discussion of the carbon-free power project. I hope you were able to read some of the materials. I think maybe Councilmember Garner, for Councilmember Page, at least this isn't a real new project, but we're at the point where we need to make a decision, not a final decision or a lasting decision, but we'd like to move forward with the decision on SMRs and nuclear in our city, and this is has been vetted by the Power Commission, and they've made a recommendation that we go to obligate ourselves to 1 megawatt at this time. And we've invited Doug Hunter here, who's the executive director of UAMPS, and he would love to take a few minutes, if that's okay, Mayor, and make a short presentation. And we've got Bruce also here to answer any questions. So.
Yes, just to clarify, not nuclear in our city. No.
Correct. Part of our resource, but we're not doing the project here in Kaysville. That's a good.
Just making sure.
Very good. You're right. I take those things for granted.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Doug Hunter, the General Manager of Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, and thank you for taking the time. I think you're pretty well familiar with the project, but I'll just give you a quick overview again. As the mayor just pointed out, it is not in your city. It's up at the Idaho National Laboratories up in Idaho, and that was a Department of Energy site that was set aside for the commercialization of nuclear reactors for energy generation. And we've partnered with the Department of Energy, and I'll get into a little bit more of that. Carbon-free power project really consists of 3 items, though. We're only going to capitalize one, and that's the reactors, but it really is based on a foundation of developing a strong energy efficiency program in the city. Now, we're not mandating that by contract. We're asking the cities to do that voluntarily, but we're supporting that effort at UAMPS as the cities would like to move forward, because we really, you don't want to build a kilowatt that's just going to be taken away by a better air conditioner or TV or anything that come out nowadays. And the second thing is distributed generation. I notice on your work agenda you're going to be talking about net metering. We think distributed generation is a great aspect for a city, because the generation goes on the load, and there's a savings of losses that come in from off the system, and as well as you don't have to pay a transmission charge at this point in time for that behind the meter. So there's a big benefit to have it come in. Obviously, it's not going to meet all the needs of the city. There's just not that type of rooftop access or even community access, but it goes. And it fits in with the carbon-free power project in a huge way, in the sense that you can have a very high renewable portfolio standard now with these reactors, because these reactors are new in the terms of how they operate. It's not new technology. It's just being repackaged in a smaller 50 megawatt package, but it can follow renewables in their variable output precisely, and it really fits in. In fact, we were just at the Governor's Energy Summit this week, and the California Independent System Operator and the Southwest Power Pool all complimented the fact they want to see these come in, because they see it helping the high penetration of renewables we're going to see, so that we truly can get to 100% clean energy. And Kaysville could get, if they wanted to take on that goal, could get to 100% clean energy. The step that we're looking at right now is to sign the power sales contracts, and that's between UAMPS and the City of Kaysville, and there's actually 34. We've had three cities decide not to move forward at this time, and that's due to portfolio situations. They just don't need power at the point in time coming in. But our coal plants, and Kaysville is in the coal plants, will be shutting down here in the next few years. A number of them are going down in the year 2022, 2025, and then 2027 to 2030, right in that range, the last coal plant will go down. And that's what we're really looking to do, is take advantage of that replacement to get to a non-greenhouse gas emitting resource that we can complement with renewables, if you so desire, to go through, and also provide resiliency. The power sales contracts have a number of off-ramps, if I could use that term, where you can make decisions to leave the project. And the very first one will be approximately a year from right now. And the cost for Kaysville City for that period of time would be approximately $10,000. We haven't fully decided as our project management committee, that's the group of cities that control the project, on whether that's going to be billed to the cities or not. And the reason being is that we're going to spend about $6 million in the next 12 months, and $3 million of that's going to come from the Department of Energy. They will give us that. And then NewScale Corporation, the entity that's building the modules, is going to give us another $1.5 million into that time frame. So UAMPS has to come up with $1.5 million, and Kaysville's share of that $1.5 million would be $10,000 at the 1 megawatt. But given the way we get reimbursement and we can moving along, we believe that we don't even have to build the cities after that on that amount. So we'll see. Bruce will be hearing that next month again, or in June, as we develop that procedure. But that would be the outlay. And then that's an automatic off-ramp at that period of time. Once we get through this $6 million spend, and that's approximately April of next year, maybe May of next year, that will require us, if we move forward, to amend the budget. And anytime we amend the budget, each participant gets the right to leave the project at that point in time. If UAMPS decides to close the project down in a year, we'll get that $1.5 million back from NewScale. So they will end up spending $3 million. They'll take the project as well if we abandon the project. So that's one of the reasons we haven't decided really to bill. If we still have a few decisions to make out there. But most of the project's been pretty well vetted. Just recently, NewScale, the NRC announced, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission announced that they've gone through phase 1, and that's the most critical phase of licensing for new reactors. Once they're done with phase 1, that means that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has gone through every aspect of this reactor and its deployment, and decided that there's nothing more to research, if you will. Now it's more or less just getting in and into the regulatory writing the license, and then there's an independent review board that everything goes through. Also, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just came out recently, about 60 days ago, and said these are the safest reactors they've ever seen. They actually said that they do not need any outside electricity in an emergency. That is, they will shut down, cool down, and they need no operator interference or additional water, because they sit underground in a pool of water. So they're orders of magnitude safer than any other reactor that we've ever had before. And that's mainly because they're small, they don't have a lot of moving parts to them, and they can just cool down very quickly. We don't have a lot of uranium in each one of these modules, in these thermos bottles they go through. The Department of Energy is really anxious to see this move forward, and this is one of the things they've been working with us on. Again, at the Governor's Energy Summit, the past Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, was there, and he too talked about how this is really a benefit to the region to have this deployed up there as we go through. And now we will be having new participants into UAMPS from the Northwest will be coming in to participate in this project going out. So it's obviously a contract we're asking you to look at, but it does have these off-ramps, and there are subsequent off-ramps as we go through this. And then eventually, before we decide to construct the project, we will come back to this governing body. That is in the contracts. It's not a matter of your representative carrying that authority. We will come back and present the entire project as it sits to this governing board, council, and mayor, and explain again, and you'll have another chance to leave the project at that point in time. All the way through this period, we'll be testing the economics. We're very well aware of the history of the nuclear industry. It is not good, but these are new. This is a new paradigm, and we're doing everything in series, and we've got everything basically scoped out, and we're willing to put these budget items. And if we exceed these budget items, then people get off ramps as you go through. I think that's more or less an overview of the project. If there's some specific questions or
Okay.
anything.
Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, so how do these compare? You said 50 megawatt. How do they compare to a standard nuclear facility, full scale in terms of size?
Yeah, so a typical light water reactor, these are pressurized light water reactors, but even if it was a boiling water reactor, these are the two reactors that we use for electric generation in the United States. There's 99 of them operating. They're all about 1,000 megawatts each. They measure the dome. You're sort of used to, you probably can visualize what I'm talking about in terms of the containment structure that sits around these things. They're about 120 feet in diameter and about a little over 200 feet tall. That same concept in our 50 megawatt reactor, we're 76 feet tall, 15 feet in diameter. So we've really reduced the size. It's also manifested. We're going to look at putting 12 of these in one facility, independently, having independent generators sitting below grade underwater, so we'd have a total of 600 megawatts. A normal big reactor would probably have 1,000, 1,500 acres to deal with that. We can do this on 35 acres. That's how small and compact they are. The other thing that's really unique about these reactors as compared to the large reactors is that because of their small size, we don't take a big efficiency hit if we decide to air cool them instead of using water to evaporate. And that's one of the decisions we want to make in this next year. On the $6 million, we're doing a final study on what that actual cost would be. It will be more expensive to air cool it than it would be to water cool it. But, and we all know about water out in the West. And so if we can avoid doing that, that would benefit the state of Idaho as well as everybody else around. So we're looking at that final thing, that final process of going through. In terms of the amount of the fuel assemblies and things like that, they're about half size. They stand about 6 feet tall versus 12 to 15 feet tall. The uranium canisters, if you will, sit through, and we're going to have a full-time employment staff that will be refueling these things once every 2 years that go through, so that we have to inspect them every 2 years for welds and that, and the inspection, we've got to take them offline. They're too small to send somebody in there when they're hot. And so we have to take them offline, and since we're going to have them offline to inspect, we're going to refuel at that very same time.
So obviously the technology is there to do it, but it seems like a little bit of a pilot project in terms of the economics. As you look into the future a little bit, is it possible that these could be distributed in different regions so that you avoid the line loss that comes with long transmission lines?
Yes, you're hitting on it. In fact, that's one of the things we're working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on right now. The hypothesis that is being proposed and is going through, and one of the steps was what I just mentioned, that with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission indicating that they're walk-away safe in an emergency. That was a big step right there, so that they don't represent a hazard. The next thing we're expecting out of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in this regard will be that our emergency planning zone. So for a large reactor, a 1,000 megawatt reactor, it is a 10-mile radius from the core. Right now, the NRC, we should see this within just the next 30 days or so, they're going to take us to our fence line for our emergency planning zone. And that's that 35-acre site. So what that really means is you can stuff things right up next to it. And because that's the standard where if radiation were exposed to the environment, to things, the level of the radiation would not be harmful to humans at the fence line. so we can put industry that, I wouldn't propose that we put them in, like any industrial application, you don't want to put them too close inside of a city. You want to put them in their proper zoning and things like that. But one of the big aspects we're looking at is these coal plants shut down, Emory and Carbon County and Sevier and Uinta and over in Millard. We can put these reactors on those coal sites that already have the water, already have the transmission. And the other unique thing about this is because we don't have a lot of operating moving parts in this facility, is that only about 15% of our workforce has to have a 4-year degree. Everybody else can have, 85% can have a high school degree and then trained in through the licensing. So that means we could employ the miners, the coal workers, the truck drivers, and really bring back that ad valorem value back to the counties that's going on. And that is an aspect that's going to go through. One of the things, and if I could just add one more thing with that regard, is that I really wanted the pricing, for us to get in, is I wanted the price of this first deployment out here to be the same cost as the nth price. Once they've got everything down. And so right now we have contractually committed NuScale that if we exceed 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour, we can abandon the project and they have to reimburse us. Our estimate right now is, our low estimate is 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour. What that really means to Kaysville is that's about the same price your coal sits in your portfolio right now, so you shouldn't have to have any type of rate impact to pull these in. And it also means that we can deploy them into other areas. Great heat source. So for an industrial park, as they go through, Senator Murkowski out of Alaska, she's really driving this, and the DOE's putting money as to get these so you can deploy one module, just one 50-megawatt generator, but for heat applications. That's really what it is a huge heat source that comes through. You can boil water with it, you can distill water with it, you can make hydrogen gases, I mean, all sorts of different things. We've already got a number of chemical refinery companies that want to butt up against us up at the Idaho National Laboratory to do this, and the DOE is going to provide that. They're going to take part of that risk out of us. They're going to lease the first module. They were looking at leasing module 1 and 2 for 5 years. And what they've asked to do now is they want to lease one module for a minimum of 10 years and possibly 20 years. So we get the same economic benefit of coming through, but they'll take that first of a kind manufacturing, deployment, and operational risk into that lease so that we don't have to run that risk as the cities. And that's another attribute that the Department of Energy's been willing to do. We're in the process of negotiating that agreement right now. In fact, my general counsel's back in Washington, D.C. today, or he'd be here with me tonight. He's back there talking to the Department of Energy on that very
Mayor, are you okay with one more question?
I want to give the other council members an opportunity to ask. Councilmember Hanson, yes.
The only negative complaint, I guess, we've had is just, it has nothing to do with the project and the idea behind it, but it's just the spent fuel rods and storage. Can you speak to that for a second? I mean, again, that's, since it's been on our agenda and it's a few times before, the only negative comment is that we don't, what's our liability? I guess I have questions about what's our potential liability as a city for that, and what are the plans for storage of the spent uranium rods?
Yeah, okay. So on our 35-acre site, 4 acres will be dedicated to spent fuel storage. And that's enough storage to run 80 years of our fuel. That is, we can take all of our waste and put it right on that 4-acre site. The canisters, they'll be sitting in what's called a dry cask storage, a canister that is a concrete steel container. And it's NRC regulated. It cannot emit any radiation. It cannot have any outside temperature except ambient air temperature on the skin, so you can't feel it. And it's monitored, but it's not. It's just they just sit out on a pad, a cement pad. They sit there. These are about 8 feet tall. The canister, the uranium inside them is in a container about 6 feet tall. They sit on out there, and we can leave them there indefinitely. As to the liability, though, so this is the way the fuel cycle works. When we buy the uranium, UAMPS would buy the uranium, we would put it into the fuel assemblies, and that would be put in. We would take about 5% of the energy out of it. That's the sad part about this. And then we will then refuel there'll be 95% of the energy still in the uranium. But that's just the nature of the statistic. We can get into that if we do. That's even with the large reactors, even the very large reactors, that spent fuel, there's still 95% of the energy in it. But it's just the way the reaction works. Then when we take it out, when we refuel, we take those canisters and we put them in the same underground pool of water in a separate area in the building, and it's called wet storage. And the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, requires us to store that for 5 years. Now, we're going to petition them as we go through our licensing to see if we can do that to only about 6 months. It still belongs to us at that point in time in the water. But our fuel cools down so fast. The main reason of 5 years, it takes 5 years for these large reactor canisters to cool down enough to put them into the dry storage. Ours cools down in a matter of months, so we can put it in there. Once we transfer it out of that wet storage inside the pool and put it into this dry cast storage, it now becomes we own it, but we have no liability or responsibility to deal with it. The Department of Energy is now responsible to move it from our site. And they actually will pay us rent on that 4 acres to store it for them. That's really what we're doing. We're storing it for the Department of Energy. And then they will take it away to some permanent repository. Now, you know, the Yucca Mountain was the big discussion that went through. You know, the House just 2 weeks ago just passed 380 to 75. So it was a bipartisan bill that went through to open up, to get funding back in for Yucca Mountain. There's also 2 sites down on the New Mexico-Texas border they're working on right now to move in for licensing. They're going through licensing right now. But as the Department of Energy reminds me every time I bring up this, because everybody's got this concern, I mean, and so I get this question all the time. They're saying, well, just tell everybody we're not moving it. We're not going to move it. We'll just contain it up at the Department of Energy. Now, the reason they want to do that is that there's other advanced reactors that they're trying to put together. These are what are called molten salt reactors, and they run at very, very high temperatures. And what they do is they take light water spent fuel waste, and they use it as their fuel. And they've just signed a contract with Terrestrial, and that's what they want. That's what they're looking at. They're going to want to use our fuel there. That reduces the waste, if you will, just down into very, very small amounts. It basically burns it up, if you will, in these molten reactors. They're probably not ready until the 30s and that, but the research will start soon. So the NRC will start to and the DOE will start to reprocess our fuel on the site. That's what they're looking at right now. So it may never leave our site. But as to liability, we have no liability once it comes out of our wet storage out there. During that period, we'll have insurance. The federal government provides that as well, and we've already been in contact with our insurance agents. There's never been an accident with spent fuel waste in the whole thing. So the actuaries look really good on it, you know, when people look to insure it. Not a single problem. And it's not wet, it's a solid. You know, it's the pellets they are about the size of the tip of your little finger. They're black, they look like those old black nibs licorice that you would see out there. And so that's a ceramic container. That little thing. It's in ceramics. And of course that's inside a metal cage, inside a backfill, inside this dry canister of lead and concrete. So, you know, and then it has this container out there. So they could probably, you know, I mean, I don't think anybody would purport they'd be there for 1,000 years, you know, to go through, and that's about what they want to do in the long-term repository. But what I've been seeing in terms of what people estimate, if it never got moved, that it would be hundreds of years, 500-600 years before those canisters would break apart. And if they ever did break apart and the rock, that concrete and lead block that they're in broke apart, you're still just going to have these little ceramic canisters. They don't blow away. It's not dust. It's not a liquid. You know, it doesn't. It's pretty benign and pretty safe. And like I said, there's never been one accident or any troubles with spent fuel at all. It's just something people, the public, you know, it sounds bad, but the other thing I like to say is we're zero emittance. Nothing comes off our site. Rainwater falls on our site, we got to collect it, just like on a coal plant. All of our pollution stays right with us. We know where every molecule of our pollution is, every bit of it. We're monitoring, unlike a coal plant or a gas plant that goes into the atmosphere, or goes into the ground, or goes things. So I think there's a really good story to tell on that down the road.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barber, did you have a question?
Yes, this might actually be for Bruce, but in the recommendation, it says that Kaysville City recommends our participation level be it, is it 1 milliwatt at this time?
1 megawatt, yes.
Megawatt, same thing. And then there was the $10,000 share that we had that would be ours. Are those correlated, or are they two separate
Yes,
things?
it's a percentage of the total.
So it is the
total of the
$10,000.
600 megawatt total, and so that's our percentage of that piece.
And it wouldn't go above that $10,000?
Not unless we changed our minds in a year and wanted more, then the percentage
change.
would
Okay.
change along with that.
That's all I wondered, is if they were the same thing.
Okay, thank you. And then, Councilmember Garn, did you have that follow-up question?
No,
Or did it get answered?
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah, let me
You're
ask a
good.
question.
Councilmember Page, please.
Okay. Hey, as you know, the last 30 years, nuclear power has really been decimated in a lot of ways, and they haven't been bringing on new plants at all. And I think a lot of it is the cost of building them is really expensive.
Right.
And a lot of them have been scrapped just to go to natural gas because it's so cheap.
Right.
I guess the question I have is how expensive is this to build this?
Well, the overnight construction costs are at a Class 4 estimate. We're not going to construct until we get down to a Class 1, but the current estimate we have right now is $2.89 billion for the overnight construction cost. But if I could just break this down differently than what you've seen, because you're dead right on in terms of characterizing the existing industry out there. So what's going on in South Carolina and Georgia right now, that's the only plants that are being built in the United States, and they just scrapped the South Carolina plants because of cost overrun and delay. But what was going on there is they're building these reactors in the field from the ground up, out in the dirt, if you will, construction site. One of the things that we'll have for cost containment is our reactor is built in a factory and hauled out to us. So the only thing we're building out in the field are typical civil works. Just concrete and rebar. It's been built many, many times. We're going to have a fixed price on that from the contractor because there's not any really safety-related stuff that has to go into it. One building, but it's not as intense as you would think it would be. So we should be able to get, what we're asking for right now is that we would have a fixed price engineering, procurement, and construction contract with the contractor on those works. So that we should have. Now, obviously, every construction project will have the potential of delay or the potential of overrun. It doesn't really matter what it is. I've done a lot of construction projects, but we build in a lot of contingency into our number that goes through. And so that 6.5 cents that I talked about right now, so characterizing this to the Georgia Vogel units out there, they're closer to 10 cents right now, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. 6.5 cents represents a greenfield combined cycle natural gas plant. That's what that 6.5 cents relates to. The 4.5 would relate to more like a brownfield, that is an existing site for a natural gas plant at today's gas prices. And as I said, we've also put in contractually what we call an economic competitive test as we're going through this with the contractor, and that's what that 6.5 is going to be measured against. So every time, once we get it Class 3 in about a year from now, it may be a little sooner, March of next year, we should have the Class 3 engineering estimate, and then and this 6.5 is on to the grid. Now, it doesn't move it to Kaysville City, but it puts it onto the grid. So it is equivalent to any other resource that be onto the grid. If it's greater than 6.5 cents, we get to walk away, and as I said, next year it'll be 100% reimbursement. That reimbursement tails down a little bit. The further we go along and take more risk, they reduce it, the percentage. But that's all for cost containment. The other thing, these reactors, as I mentioned, very simple. They really don't have a lot of moving parts, and it's just the drive mechanism for the rods that control the reaction are the only moving parts, and some valves. There's no pumps. There's no large diameter pipe. Everything is pretty small, in terms of the way around. And so everybody feels pretty comfortable. In NewScale and Floor Construction, it's the contractor, are willing to bet on it, if you will, that way. So because we're well aware of that history. We're well aware of it. And so we don't want to repeat history. We don't. And we've been using those as lessons learned. So we should have the cost containment.
Just a short follow-up. What's the reaction of the people on this? Is there opposition to this? Where I know some of these projects have been slowed down substantially because of activists and environmentalists and concerned people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, the public has a right to weigh in on this. This is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will go through a public process to deal with this. That's into our time frame and into our budget as we go through. We're doing this under a new aspect of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulation that came through with George W. Bush in 2005 in the Energy Policy Act, and it's called Part 52. And so what it does is that there'll be a 30-day period that the public can weigh in on the license, but they're prohibited from weighing in on anything except the factual basis of the safety finding. So it isn't about if radiation is dangerous to the public at large or things of that nature. Our site, obviously, is in a very friendly community. Idaho Falls is a member of UAMPS. Almost everybody that works at INL lives in Idaho Falls or Blackfoot. There, Blackfoot's very supportive of this. Now we have the Shoshone-Bannock now are supporting us going through. So we don't have any NIMBY, if you will, right up. There is the Snake River Alliance that's out of Boise, Idaho. They've indicated they're going to intervene, but we haven't seen much from them. I see more on their website than they send to anything. We've got Heal, Utah, that's opposed to it here in Utah. Uranium Watch out of Moab, Utah. They've already indicated that they will intervene as they'll go through. But the process is way different than the old way. And we do have budget for legal and room for scheduled delay pursuant to the experts telling us on what we should do in our pricing and in our timeline in case we get through.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Garn.
Just, this is way boilerplate question, but if these are built, and hopefully they are, because arguably, environmentally, I think this rivals, if not surpasses, solar and wind as far as the footprint on the environment. But if the economics work and we build a lot of these regional plants, right on its heels is nuclear fusion technology. When do you see that coming online, and how would that interface as we replace fossil fuels to produce energy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's very hard to really look down the road on that. As you well understand, fusion versus fission is a much tougher process to get going because of the amount of energy you have to put into it versus the amount of energy you get out of it. And so that's still the largest. The entropy problem is still the single largest problem on that. The best estimates, I've been to a number of, I'm going back next week again with the Nuclear Energy Institute on advanced reactors. So I hear about a lot of different advanced reactors. I sit in the buildings out there. So the molten salts are the next ones coming on. They're talking about 2035 at the earliest, 2040. And fusion is still talking in large scale, is still talking about 2050, 2060. Out in that range. Now, there is an aspect, they're working in Canada right now on fusion that is to really get it small and see it, but that's a new concept that people haven't. It's sort of reminiscent of what happened at the University of Utah with Pons and Fleshman, in terms of little small thing, but it's out there. These things are going through.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to move this to our action agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Barber. Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, it passes 4-0. Thank you. All right, net metering agreement proposed changes.
This discussion is in regards to two proposed changes. One is to our existing net metering policy that we adopted as of January 1st, 2018. And if you read the executive summary, you've kind of hit on these. But I think the first one is to that one. The other one is to our grandfathered solar users. So the first one is an effort to prevent people from overbuilding their system. That's to the existing net metering agreement. The second is to those in a grandfather status, solar users, and it is allowing the city to pay them on a monthly basis as opposed to a yearly basis. I guess the monthly basis has proved pretty time-consuming for billing purposes and for some of our staff. These changes have been reviewed by Mr. Mills. We've vetted this also through the Power Commission, and we're here for discussion. And of course, Bruce would be able to answer most of our technical questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Dang it. Sorry,
Oh,
I did.
that's okay. Question, Councilmember Barber.
On the first item about not paying them beyond, so this is a change from the net metering agreement that even the early customers had.
Yeah, yes.
So were there residents who were anticipating overbuilding as maybe like an income source, that this will really greatly change their experience?
It's really not going to change too many of them. I think we had this year with the light winter that we had. I think there were 12 of them that we had to pay at the end of the year.
Okay.
But like I say, that Power Commission and us as staff too, we're trying to incentivize people to not overbuild their systems.
You want them to just match what they're consuming?
Yeah, we'll only pay them, for what they consume. They can't overproduce. So this should incentivize them not to overbuild their systems.
Okay. That was my main concern. If we had residents that had one expectation and now we're changing it.
Yeah, we only, as far as the new net meter agreement, there's only, I think there's three of them now on. Okay. So we just, like I say, in the net metering agreements, both the old one and the new one, and in the net metering policy, it states that, with any 30 days notice, we can, with approval of the council, we can change anything in the agreements also.
Okay. And I tried to look for Rocky Mountain's net metering agreement just to compare if they have it. Do you know? I couldn't find it. Do they have the same experience for
well, there's a setup is that there's always been that way, that they don't pay anything. Okay. You lose anything, they've always just lost it.
Oh, okay.
So they've never paid anything back if they overproduced.
Okay, thanks. I was trying to find that and I couldn't. And I think number 2, I was just confused. So instead of paying per month, we'll pay at the end of the year?
No, it's opposite. Right now, the grandfather ones, it's a credit each month, and then at the end of the year, if they've overproduced, then we pay them back. But we have our billing person is doing almost 200 bills a month, hand doing them, because the billing system cannot handle the negative numbers and keeping track of where that was last month. So it would be very cost effective to have that do that and be right in the billing system. Also, that'll be a benefit to them because they will get actually paid retail rate each month.
Yeah.
And so it's a win-win for them. So
okay, I just must have been reading it incorrectly. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions at this time? Okay. No, make a motion.
Well, I move that we approve the net metering agreement as proposed.
Okay, and move it to action item.
Yeah, we move it.
Yeah.
We're just going to action. Well, I'll do that then. Let's move it to the action.
All right, that sounds great.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Page and seconded by Councilmember Barber. Councilmember Page.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 4-0. Okay, budget discussion. Jane.
Again, we have this on the work item like we did last session. We received some feedback from you to ask some of our department heads to come tonight and answer questions. They haven't prepared a formal presentation, but we've asked them to come prepared to discuss and justify the requests they've made for the fiscal year 2019 budget. So we've got Chief Erickson, Cole, and Chief Oberg here. And encourage them to maybe get a little closer to the front of the room, and if we can, just turn the time over to you to ask questions. Of course, we've got Mr. Story here as well, which would be beneficial.
Right. Thank you. How do we want to do this, Council? Anybody in specific ask for?
Maybe we just start the department and go through.
Okay.
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
Start with the fire department because Chief's looking
All right.
Can't wait to
Thank you,
hop
Chief
up there.
Erickson.
Whatever you need. Best dressed.
Definitely best dressed, yes.
Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity.
So can we pull up the fire department part of the, oh, we don't have that?
No.
Okay.
Do you have specific, Chief, do you want to encapsulate what you are asking for?
Sure.
Thanks.
One of our first goals is to transition from part-time to full-time in the future, one step at a time. The reason for that, we have shift bids the way we work. So the first Wednesday of every month, we bid for shifts for that next month coming up. So since I've been there, we average 240. We need 240 shifts covered in a month. Full-timers cover 120 of those shifts, and then they are covered with part-time employees. We average 20 open shifts, so 20 days a month where we need coverage. We have 30 shift changes throughout that month because our part-timers have full-time jobs. And when that full-time boss calls, that's what pays their bill. Another thing that is a little bit of concern on the part-time side, we have a lot of part-time people that work at full-time departments. Their SOPs, their procedures are set a certain way. They're not necessarily the same as Kaysville. They're not the same as Farmington, Layton, or any other department. So it becomes a safety concern for us that they get on the fire ground and now all of a sudden they're following maybe Layton's procedures because that's what they're conditioned to do, and they're not following Kaysville. So that's just another justification, if you will, to go more on the full-time side. And then since January of 2017, we actually have had over 100 days where we haven't been covered with 4 people. We do run short.
All right, thank you. So I think the proposal was for 3 additional.
Three new full-time firefighters.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, okay. All right, any follow-up questions?
So are those covered? I just see the new firefighters, the 3 of them at the 60%. Are they also compensated in that first line item, the salaries and wages?
I don't, which one? You want to show? This one here? Yes, if I'm reading this correctly, first year cost net is $68,000 for 3 additional, and that would general fund $41,000, ambulance fund $27,000. Is that what you have there?
For the 3 new.
Correct.
And then the salaries and wages are for the existing staff that we have.
I don't understand that question. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm seeing the first line item.
So the first page, Dean, salaries and wages.
So that's
going
probably
from 317.
Section 7. There should be a fire tab. So it'd be that information right here, Paul. Yes.
So you're looking at the first line item, that 1057-110. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So that's for our existing staff.
For FY18? Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's the number that we have.
Okay. And then I can't remember where it is on here, the new equipment that we're
You
wanting to
bet.
purchase.
It's, if you switch over, it's 1057-741. It's that capital equipment lease.
Oh, okay. Well.
And that has been shifted to the.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that.
To the debt service fund. So,
yeah.
So the proposal is to purchase that apparatus through a capital lease program. So the cost will be spread out over a 5-year period.
Through the debt service program?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Debt service fund. Mm-hmm.
That must, that must be why I couldn't find it on here.
Yeah.
And actually, to give you more on that,
yeah.
The standard is to put a fire truck in reserve status at the 15-year mark. That particular fire truck that we're talking about is 17 years old, but it's had problems since 2009. Ironically enough, since 2009, it's had trouble passing emissions. We've put $7,000 in it since 2009, $1,300 since I've been here. So it has some issues. It failed emissions yesterday and then again today, so we have more issues with it. But more importantly, we're getting one vehicle for two, if you will. If we can use that one engine, put it in reserve status for maybe future growth, another station potentially. But we plan on selling our heavy rescue vehicle, and that new vehicle that we were buying is a heavy rescue / pumper vehicle. So it's a dual purpose vehicle. Being 80% of our calls are up in this area throughout here, we think it would better serve right here at Station 61. So that's our thought behind it.
Okay.
And there are certain requirements when you do put it in reserve status. Seat belts need to be changed. Safety upgrades need to be upgraded for the safety of the firefighter. And the reason why they use that 15 years is because they want to ensure that it's still going to pump water for the safety of firefighters in a building.
So that one would go to, the one that we currently have would go to reserves and then be replaced by this?
And heavy rescue, we would sell.
Oh, okay. And that's the one that we've just paid off? Which one have we?
No, that
which
one's...
one have we just paid off? One of them.
That actually, heavy rescue is 21 years old.
Okay. Which one did we just paid off?
It's the area.
The aerial, our ladder truck.
So we've paid that off, and then now
It's
essentially
going
we're
to be
getting
paid off this year. Is that correct?
There's a 6 months worth of payment, so not a full year of payment, but a half a year. Yeah.
Then that money would go. To
So
this new,
correct. That's
this
where
new
the
dual purpose.
170 is.
170 and
about 170 is that line item on your page there.
And as Paul
Tab
mentioned,
9.
I'm sorry, as Paul mentioned, we may see some
I do see it.
additional savings there as well with the sale of the old vehicle.
Okay. Councilmember Adams.
You kind of touched on the tip of the iceberg about a future fire station number 2. And another concept that's been rolling around in our meetings also has been the idea of forming a fire district and kind of taking the city component out of fire. South Davis does that. It seems to function well. It might be slightly off topic. Do you have a feeling or opinion on a fire district?
Yeah, I got plenty of opinions on it, and you don't. It's hard to have an argument against it, to be honest with you.
Well, I agree fully with that.
Yeah.
So, your Chief Bassett serves 6 different councils, a district, commissioner. So, there's many hats there, but it works fine for him. It really does.
Well, and the concern and the overall objective and savings to the taxpayer is we're not overlapping.
Sure.
And not doubling up.
Absolutely.
Just spending money that doesn't need to be spent. Whereas a district, I know for years we've wanted a number 2 station around here, but a district, with teaming up with all the 3-4 cities around us, more cost effectively accomplish that. So
sure,
it's something that you touched upon that topic. I hope that's the bigger picture going forward.
And so, Chief, what you're asking for, though, is not going to go to waste, right? So
still,
if down the road we decide to structure.
Even if you went the district route, you're still not wasting. There's a need for another station on the west side. Mm-hmm. That's apparent. Our run data supports that we are deficient in our response times on that side. We have 3 different zones, fire response districts that we fail to meet times in. So that's very apparent.
Okay, thank you.
What is the gross cost of the truck, the new truck?
$780,000.
$800,000.
Yeah, we're roughly there. And with the cost of metal, it will go up 3% the longer we delay. So you're talking another $24,000 in the future.
And the ladder truck, Dean, it was what, 1.1 million, 1.2 million just a few years ago?
I think it was closer to about the $750,000 at the time. That's been quite a few years ago, 6 years ago.
Okay, good. All right. Any further questions
So after this,
Councilmember Barber.
Sorry, we'll have after we hire these 3 full-time fire employees, and then we'll still have a budget for part-time as needed.
That is correct.
So
we're still filling slots. Another difference between part-time and full-time. Full-time can work 2912. Part-timers can work 1508 as far as hours in a year.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you're kind of held to that.
Sure.
And so a clarifier.
Councilmember Adams.
I am.
Was that employee cost for the new 3? That's $68,000 gross, or that's per person?
That's for all 3.
All 3.
That is correct.
Going forward. Oh.
I did a little different calculations, and I came up with a little bit lower, but Dean's a lot smarter than I am, so with the numbers, so 68 gross, correct.
It says 80 in
Won't
here.
hold you to the penny. Thanks, Chief. Got it.
Well, you never know.
Well, and Councilmember Barber, did you have something else? No. Okay, Shane.
Just maybe, if Councilmember Barber, if you're looking at that fire department, if you look at 1057-125, I think it's line 2, you can see the paid on-call firefighters going from 185 to 92. That's where that saving.
And then we get it.
That's where it's offset. But another thing that we do not have in the fire service, we don't have a manpower availability factor, and that's really missing. Meaning, we have to be there. There's 4 people, at least right now, have to be there. There's no factor for sick leaves, injuries, days off. There is no factor. Most of the time, there's some sort of factor, whether it's 2.5 or 2.8, whatever that figure is. But we don't have that. And I think that's important to note, that there is a need for that.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, that slot needs to be filled.
Yeah. So it feels to me that you've put forward the bare essentials that you need to function for the coming fiscal year.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Councilmember Barber.
I was just saying, because I like to have the talking points right when I'm talking to residents, that we're moving to a full-time staff, but it doesn't seem as if the investment is really far outweighed. It seems like we'll get a more consistent staff because the numbers are pretty comparable.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
As a fire service as a whole in this state, we're having retention problems.
Yeah.
It's easy to blame the Tier 2 retirement for us, but that's reality. When our retirement went to 25 years and at 37%, we're having some big retention problems. You brought up South Davis Metro. They wanted to hire, and they're 3 short that they wanted to hire. The people just weren't there.
Wow.
I know Layton's having a problem. Syracuse, they had a pretty good turnout for a part-time. But when you're talking a good turnout, you're talking 11, 12 people. We're not getting the numbers that we used to get. 200 people applying for 5 jobs or whatever that number is.
And then finally, the example you were telling about a similar city moving to the full-time staff.
Yeah, American Fork.
Yeah.
They're at 27 firefighters.
And similar,
right
and
now,
they're similar size.
And building a second station. They're 30,000-ish people.
I just found that interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's amazing. It's always amazing to me what we're able to accomplish with what we have. So appreciate your efforts on this.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Very good.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chief Oberg.
Mayor, just so you know, that's been 15 minutes of the 20 that were allotted, just for your information.
Okay. So focus.
So we're going to have to skip Cole? So what we're saying.
What did it say?
2 minutes.
Don't make
Such
me gavel you down.
Chief.
All right. So, Chief, do you want to just give us a snapshot, what you're asking for and why, and like that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you've had a chance to look at our proposed budget, much of our numbers haven't changed from last year. We run on really fixed costs. A couple categories have changed. Our capital account, we're asking for 4 vehicles. We need 4 vehicles this year. That number reflects 4 patrol cars and the equipment to make them patrol cars, lights, cameras, radars, cages, things like that. The other account that you'll see an increase in is our salary account. I've asked for one more officer, a school resource officer, and I thought this would be a good chance to talk a little bit about our schools. And I will give a challenge coin to any of you that can tell me how many students we have in this city day in, day out. Or close guess.
20,000?
Very good.
Oh, high five.
We have 19,300 students in this city that we serve, and we try to take care of them with 2 full-time officers and 3 officers that give 12 hours a week. And it makes me nervous. It's made me nervous since I was new here, and it's gotten worse as the school problems have gotten worse. With school shootings and threats and all these things we're seeing and the expectations of the community. If any of you go to a community council meeting and talk to them about the police department, they're all going to complain. If it's a junior high community council, they're going to complain that we don't have full-time officers in our junior highs. That's been a consistent theme. Those are the 3 schools we provide part-time help in. This year, at some of we had the same problems as all the other cities had, is students disrupting school with behavior and threats of gun violence on their Twitter accounts, things like that, things that we have to react to. Some of the other things that involve cell phones and social media, those things, everybody has a cell phone, and all these kids do, and they just don't have the maturity to deal with them properly, so we end up interceding in a lot of those. It eats up a lot of our resources, our officer resources that we would like to be answering calls with or doing traffic with, things like that. So as these problems have kind of come to a head this year, the school district decided that they're going to be much more proactive. They met with all of the chiefs in Davis County and told us, we're going to solve this problem for you. We're going to be more proactive. We're going to monitor their social media accounts. We're hiring someone to do that. We've bought this expensive program to do this. And these problem students, we're going to take out of your schools quickly and resolve that problem so the schools can do their business and you don't have the disruptions to deal with. And everybody was happy, except for me, because I know where these students are going, because Kaysville houses the alternative programs for Davis County. So Mountain High is expanding. We've also got the Renaissance Academy, which we provide education to the sex offenders and all of the youth that are in custody, like in Farmington Bay. We deal with them. The adult education at Canyon Heights, all the safe school violators we deal with. So those students that we've already been dealing with, kind of with our Mountain High School resource officer, we now are going to get an influx of more of, and I don't want to call them problem children, but they are definitely challenging for communities and concerning for me. And so when the school district talked to me about this, I grabbed them right after the chief's meeting and said, you guys are killing me on this. It's gonna cost me a lot of resources. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. And I told them, if I ask for an officer, will you pay half? And they kind of hem-hawed, but they came back and said, if you get the position, we'll meet you halfway. And so this budget reflects an initial cost for that officer, but the school district will also pay almost half. They will pay half of 9 months' worth of this officer's salary and benefits, and the other 3 months we would have them in the summertime, and they're not obligated to the schools, but would be obligated to us. So those are the 2 accounts that we've got an increase in. I don't know if you have any questions for me outside of that, but I'd be happy to answer them.
No, thank you. Way to bargain. Good job. Thank you.
Should have asked for 3/4.
Councilmember
I will next
Barber,
time.
did you have any additional questions? Any questions?
No, mine's been answered.
My question is
Councilmember Adams.
Equipment. Can we live without the 4 vehicles? How's the fleet doing?
No, We can't.
We live with 2 vehicles.
We really can't. If you look back in that account, 2 years ago we purchased no vehicles because we were trying to help fire department with air packs, and that put us behind. But we realized we're part of the same team, and that was more important than vehicles to us. But I have 2 vehicles that are derelict right now, and they are unreliable, and they're constantly in the shops, and they're just costing us a lot of money. And then they needed to go this past year really, and I've got 2 more that are coming up that I need to. If we fall a certain amount behind, it's going to cost a ton of money to get caught up, and I do not want to see us back in the position the department was in when I first got here, where we weren't even able to patrol some shifts because we didn't have operable police vehicles.
How old are the 2? The 2 really bad ones, derelict ones, as you say?
I can tell you the mileage on one, but if you give me 5 minutes, I can run back to the PD and get all the information on them.
Just guesstimates.
One of them.
200,000 miles.
No, nowhere near that. One of them's got 108, but those are police-driven miles, so it's a lot of quick starts, quick stops, and a lot of idle time, which is hard on an engine as they're idling to do radar and things like that. So they're police miles tend to be hard miles on cars. The other one that we really needed to get rid of this year is a dare car, and again, I'm not sure of the year on that. I would have to. I can run and grab it if you'd like, though.
We can talk later.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Wonderful. Thank you, Chief Oberg. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Cole.
Is Nick going to be mad at me if I go 20 minutes?
Probably.
I'm not going to take 20 minutes. But
I run the meeting, and I give you permission.
Well, I don't want Nick to get mad at me.
Evidently, he's the authority.
No, I'm just kidding.
When it comes to time, we'll accept his authority.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just maybe touch on a couple of the points. I know Councilmember Barber had some questions on our buildings as far as our 1050, 730 account. Maybe why the increase there, and I can just give you a brief explanation of what those projects are in our buildings account. So Parks and Recreation, we oversee all of the facilities as well. And so one of the needs we have is in this building, City Hall, with actually 2 of the needs. In the back of the building is the carpet. You probably all walked on the carpet in the back, and it's lived its life. We've had it stretched once, and there's just nothing more that we can do other than it's time to replace it, just like you would in your home. It's run its life. The second item here in this building is you probably noticed last July when it was really hot in this building. We have 2 7.5-ton AC units that cool this half of the building. One of those units is it's gone. It's 1986. It's old. It's just beyond repair. What happened last summer was the one working unit sprung a leak at 3 p.m. the date of the City Council meeting, and couldn't get it fixed. And so what we're proposing in that is just replace the one 7.5-ton unit that's just not working and can't be rebuilt. And then the third item is relating to the fire station. We have a roof that is leaking on the north side of the building. It's a flat roof. The membrane has, through the cold, heat, and thaw, and expansion, contraction, it has now lived its life and springing leaks. And we originally bid that out last fall thinking that it was going to be something that maybe we could do in our current budget, but the budget estimates came in higher than we had for, and so that's why we threw it into this new budget year to replace that flat membrane roof at the fire station. So those hopefully answer the questions in the buildings account as far as why there's an increase there. And then I'll just touch very quickly on maybe one other one that maybe has some questions on is a request in our cemetery for a new full-time position in the cemetery, relieving a lot of the stress that we're experiencing with the growth of the city. Also with that growth, there's growth in the use of the cemetery as far as burials and interments, headstones, all that kind of thing, and then alleviating some of the strain that's occurring here at City Hall. the cemetery is kind of broken out and kind of a hodgepodge of who does what, and hopefully this will help consolidate some of that and kind of create a one-stop person that someone can go to for questions. Right now it's kind of Kathy, Maria, myself, a couple others do certain functions, and so that's the request. I can go into a lot more detail on that if you would like, but it's just kind of the brief
Great.
overview.
Thanks, Cole. Any specific questions for Cole? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. I can't find it. I think last fiscal year we had money set aside for the old library. Did that get returned or roped? Where did that end up?
That's in the capital. Dean would probably be better able to answer that question.
Yeah, that was in the capital projects fund, so that will just remain in that fund as a balance. We currently don't have anything programmed for the new library at this stage.
Okay. Thank you. And if I'm remembering right, it was, did we have like 75,000 set aside or something like that? What was it?
About 450.
Okay, that's good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Are there any equipment requests?
Councilmember Adams.
Equipment requests, just in our Parks Department, we have, would be a mower. We operate 8 mowers, and by the time they run their life cycle at the end of that 8 years, same thing with a vehicle. So that's really the only equipment request. It's in our parks, in our 1070, 740 is 1 mower.
Cool. Thanks, Cole.
Great. Okay. I think that's it.
And you hopefully do see a reduction in some community events and some other things that we're trying to reduce some costs there. So,
yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other staff members that you wanted to ask questions of this evening? Anyone? No? All right. I think we've done our more than our 20 minutes. I think we got a lot covered in that amount of time, so appreciate that. Now we need to move on to our Human Resource Manual review.
We first gave you a draft copy of the Human Resource Manual 2 meetings ago, about a month ago, and the request was to bring it back at this meeting. I hope you've had the chance to review it. Again, we believe it's kind of what we've done is really bring it up to 2018, and we're excited about pushing this out to our staff, getting them more familiar with the regulations that we have here in Kaysville. If you have suggestions for changes, want to have a discussion about some of what those are, we're happy to have those tonight. I also maybe would just reiterate that this is it's not a one-shot deal. This is what I would consider a document that we should review at least annually, if not more, as much as we'd like to. So, but I think we have a good version here in front of you, and we're here to answer questions.
Thank you. A question I have for council. So, how would you like to handle this? Would you like to compile suggestions on this and submit them to Shane and Nick, and then that's probably the most efficient way to do it instead of going page by page, it would seem to me. Councilmember Garn, did you have a suggestion?
No, I was just nodding in agreement that it's not good to do editing in any kind of meeting, let alone
editing by committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So perhaps should we move it to the action item? Would that be okay, Councilmember Barber?
Unless there were specific areas you wanted to draw attention to and get feedback on?
I don't think there is from our perspective. At the last meeting, we did mention maybe 5 or 10 things that we thought would be of note, but really we made a substantial amount of changes, so it'd really be hard to say what was maybe more important than something else. But
okay, Councilmember
might even be good. I'm so sorry.
Shane.
I just was thinking it might even be good to even look at the sections and see if there are I think even if the sections might instill some questions. If you want to ask a question that you may think is a dumb question that you haven't maybe read every detail of this, please ask the dumb question, because there are no dumb questions when it comes to a document this size. It's just a big document.
Councilmember Barber.
This may be a difficult question to answer, but in policies like the annual leave policy, and I even saw the medical insurance, which I know has been a hot item, out of our control. But are there major changes to our staff's experience for leave? Like, as soon as this gets passed, they'll have a big difference in their work experience?
No, that's a really great question, actually. And I believe, and Dean, maybe you should jump in if I say something wrong, but I believe that what we tried to do was reflect current conditions on the ground. Really what we were doing day to day. If there's some things that we were doing that we shouldn't be doing, we either try to put it in there, or this is an opportunity to correct those kinds of behaviors or actions. But I think mostly we try to reflect what's actually happening.
Okay. Because that would be my concern, is if where I'm not familiar with the current policies, if we're changing something that's really going to drastically change there.
I really don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
Would you agree, Dean?
No, I think in most cases it will provide a lot of clarification for employees regarding to employment status and different issues that we've tried to review.
Great. Councilmember Garn.
I think this may be, I have some little ticky-tacky things that I'll do later, but this is maybe substantive enough to just ask the question at this point, and that is in the section on 2.01, employment equal employment opportunity statement, and also talking about sexual and other kinds of harassment, including, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think there's the very prescribed discrimination laws and also sexual harassment. But then there's sort of another category that's broader, hostile work environment. And we sort of put those all together, and then at the end, we have this statement where the city determines that if the city determines, so it accepts complaints, but then if the city determines that the complaint is not bona fide or that the employee has provided false information regarding the complaint, disciplinary action may be taken against the individual who filed the complaint or gave the false information. So I completely understand the false information. That, in my mind, is something that could always rise to the level of disciplinary action. But what do we mean by bona fide? And I want to put that in the context of work environment or hostile work environment, because typically that standard is if the employee feels like it's, so it's a very sort of subjective thing. If someone calls me Jakey, I may not be offended, or I may be offended. The person who's not offended, well, then I'm not saying anything about it. But the person who's offended at maybe repeated, as people have repeatedly called me Jakey, and maybe I take exception to that and I feel like it's hostile, so I report it. That, in that, because we lump all these together, I'm wondering what bona fide means, because it almost sort of implies that if someone brings Nick, if you'd like to kind of, I think.
Yeah, I think the idea here is if you have a sincere complaint, that you're not trying to deceive or harass somebody or something. If you have a sincere complaint, the city's not going to take action against you for bringing that sincere complaint forward, candidly, regardless of how trivial or serious it may be. But I think the city certainly recognizes that these allegations are, any kind of allegations like this, they take up a lot of time. They're very serious allegations. And so in crafting the policy, I think we tried to balance. We would like you to come forward with anything you're uncomfortable with, sincerely uncomfortable with, but don't come forward with things that are not sincere.
Yeah, and I think the standard, as I think about it more, the words, I'm really thinking about the definition of the words and the impression that it creates in the mind of someone reading it. And I think bona fide, does mean that. Most people would recognize that it's a sincere or a real heartfelt complaint. There's no false information. But if you're doing this just to be vindictive or, in fact, harass herself, then, then tables turn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would agree and support
Councilmember
that.
Adams.
I think that the element of discipline, automatic discipline that comes along with that, who determines and defines what's bona fide? What's bona fide for one is not for another, and vice versa. I think that's inappropriate to say that you will be disciplined because, and I agree fully with Councilmember Guard's line of thinking here. I would never want to discourage any individual because the automatic mindset that someone will have is they're going to walk away for something that's like, well, I'll let that go. But if they're like, well, if I bring that forward, this book says that I'm automatically disciplined, so if enough people gang up against me, I'm disciplined. No, I fully disagree with the disciplinary automatic trigger there. That's wrong. An employee should always have a right to voice whatever they say without fear of retaliation. And whistleblowing should not be something that is discouraged, and I think that does discourage it. And if they want to come and complain or how it's their right to think somebody looked at me this way today and it's been building for 8 months and it's wrong. I can't prove it, but it shouldn't mean that, well, you're going to be fired now.
And I would just point out that it doesn't dictate that disciplinary action shall be taken. It says may be taken. So it's discretionary.
You're still impregnating that into people's minds that their job and their income and the way they sustain their family is more important than perhaps settling an issue at work. So they'll let it go. But in all reality, shouldn't have to deal with that.
Councilmember Garn?
And just to be clear, I actually like that section in general. Just wanted to make sure that the definitions were clear, the impression that's created is clear, but I definitely think there should be, just like the other behavior that could, the harassment or other types of behavior that could, that may involve disciplinary action, so would bringing a false report. I mean, that seems very clear and I think is an important part of it. And the other thing I would mention is, just like any policy, it's carried out by human beings, right? So there's a element of professional judgment, and that's part of what we get evaluated on. Those of us who manage or work with people or human resources, when we make those decisions, do people always make the right decision in every case? No. That's also why there's probably several levels of review to those types of actions, so that other sets of eyes can take a look at it. But I don't think you can't put every possible situation in a policy. Some of it has to be left to professional judgment.
Any other questions? Okay. Councilmember Barber.
A recommendation, and I haven't read every word of this, would be obviously you have to have the qualifier of false accusations, but maybe build up the support that will come from employees that want to bring something forward. Maybe build that part up, and leave the other one there.
Yeah. Say something like we foster an environment of
absolutely. And you're welcome to come, and we have a safe environment for that. I think that would be really great. And then the other thing is that I was reading about that if a agreement can't be found within staff, that the complaint surfaces to the city council level. Is there any in-between part there when the city council comes in?
Talking like a grievance situation?
Yeah.
So the employee first starts, I believe, with their supervisor, and then they have the opportunity to go to, I think, the city manager after that, and I think after that it go to the city council.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, do you feel comfortable moving this from the work to action at this time? Okay, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Yeah, I move that we move the human resource manual to an action item.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Page, seconded by Councilmember Barber. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 4-0. All right. Now it is time for call to the public. And we have David Saunders, followed by Dean Wall.
This is in reference to the net metering. I would like to make a recommendation that instead of it being neutral for the cost versus credit for power consumption, and I should state that I am not I do not generate my own power. I have looked into it, but I'm just too conservative in my house. We don't spend enough to make it cost effective. But I'm just looking at it and thinking that I think there should be a little bit of a margin in there, so that way on a cloudy year where the production is not as high, or conversely on a sunny year where there's a slight discrepancy between the amount that you use in electricity versus the amount that gets generated, that there be a slight tolerance band in there, and I would recommend probably about a 10% margin. So that way people can have a little bit of safety, so that way when they get hit one year and the environment is different the next year, that it doesn't play a double jeopardy on them. I would also like to point out, this has nothing to actually do with the policy, but just to bring it to your attention, that there are some meters that can actually modify the power factor that goes back onto the grid, thus acting like a grid stabilizer. We probably don't have any of those on the market currently in Kaysville. They're typically more expensive, and there's been no need for them. But I would encourage you to consider that those kinds of meters or that kind of system may warrant an additional benefit because they're providing an additional benefit to the grid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Wall. We've missed you.
Like I say, I apologize for not being here. I usually am, but I got pneumonia and it went sepsis, and it's taken me a little while to get back to normal. So I apologize for not being here and giving you guys a bad time. So a couple of things I wanted to bring up. The fire station leak in the roof. When I worked for Northwest Pipeline, we had the same type of roof that we had, or that you have over there, and DuPont actually made that roof, and by threatening a lawsuit against them, they actually came back and re-roofed our whole roof at no cost to us. So it may be something you want to look into as far as that. I don't know. I don't know who made the roof, but most of those type of roofs don't live up to the life that they say they will. The other thing is on the on item number, the work item A, the carbon-free thing. I think we need to, instead of doing that, I didn't introduce my name. I'm Dean Wall. Okay, but California has made it possible that we're going to be getting back the IPP project by 2021. And the natural gas, I mean, because they came in, PG&E came in and bought, when we were working on that project, when PG&E came in and bought Utah Power and Light, and then transferred all the electricity to California and made it all coal-fired plant. The natural gas generators are on site. They just never been installed. But they've outlawed any type of coal or natural gas type of electricity being going to California, and so we will be getting that IPP project back, and I think we ought to at least look in to see what kind of a cost we could get through Utah Power and Light on some of that, because I know they want to go to natural gas, but because it's under the control of PG&E right now, they can't install those natural gas generators. But it may be something else instead of nuclear. It might be something that we can look at too, because natural gas is about as anti-pollution as you can get as far as for generating electricity. And I can't say that we've got a hostile work environment around here, at least in Kaysville. I've tried for several months to get the police chief to shoot me, and he refuses. So
shame.
He offers to tase me, though. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but
thanks, Dean. Okay. All right, we're going to go to council member reports. I'm going to start, actually. A couple of things. Council members, you'll find at your places we've got an evaluation in the envelope. Also, I've sent you those that have applied for Planning Commission thus far. We still have until the 22nd, so if there's anybody else out there who wants to put in an application, we are still accepting applications. Also, I had a conversation with Mayor Pullman from Fruit Heights, and we were hoping to get together our councils socially, just so that we know who our partners are on the other side there. Perhaps Wednesday, the 13th of June. So if you could send me an email, we thought we could do barbecue at the, Bowery or something. So just let me know how your schedules look for that. And Shane and I will be out of town Saturday through Wednesday, and we're looking forward to Public Works Week next week. And I don't want to steal somebody's thunder, but 4 Lanes to Freedom, turn it over to Michelle.
We are looking forward to Public Works Week, and especially the attention that Public Works is paying to improving our city all around. We have more funding and more emphasis on our road infrastructure particularly, and so they're working really hard. So we're going to focus on that. They're visiting elementary schools. They're doing all sorts of things. And yes, go ahead.
Well, I was also saying, Councilmember Garn is over Public Works, but I was thinking
we're blending the two.
An event with
celebrating.
Well, I was planning to seed the report.
Seed.
On Public Works.
Seed away. You can take it over.
Councilmember
Seed
Barber.
away.
No,
okay.
seed means I give it to you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were meaning build it up, like really.
No.
And let me take. Anyway, so next Thursday evening, we will have our Public Works out. We'll have ability to community to come talk to us and celebrate the first of many projects going through the city for road improvement with the overpass, which you may be aware of, for 4 Lanes to Freedom. We're excited about that. So many more improvements to come too.
Great. And something that's really wonderful about Councilmember Barber is that she is finding opportunities to celebrate the seemingly small wins, but that's a big win that council members who were here previous to us made sure that things got settled with that bridge so that we could restripe it to 4 lanes. So thank you for the work that you guys did to allow for this to happen. Anything, Councilmember Garn?
I think I would just ask Councilmember Barber, so when is the striping project's going to be this weekend, right? And then a paving, but isn't there also like what date is the celebration?
So the contractor chose to start on Sunday, and we're not sure if it'll go through Monday or be completed on Sunday, the restriping project itself. And then our Public Works, the end of Public Works week celebration is Thursday evening, starting at 6 o'clock, right at the southeast corner of Barnes Park. So we will be there.
All right. Community development. Anything, Councilmember Page? All right.
I just have 2 comments. One is quickly, I requested that we visit as a council and to be put on the agenda a policy discussion concerning incentives that are given to new businesses coming to the city. I'd like to re-request that. Let it be set for the record, Maria, if you don't mind. Thank you. Number two, as we talked about budget, one item of concern is any kind of stagnant contracts that we have with the city. You know, particularly, I've asked for a few years now that we bid out our health insurance broker, not the providers, the broker. Again, if you wouldn't mind, Maria, I'd like that scored for the record. Thank you.
All right. I think we're ready for move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you.
No, I'm going to have these guys do it. It just goes on that case, that sheet on this rock.
It is. It is. So
I had the same problem with my password, so I just